For the first session today, we have with us Shri Sanjay Pant, the Deputy Director General of Standardization Division at the Bureau of Indian Standards, the National Standard Body of India. He is an eminent civil engineer with more than 30 years of experience in diverse areas of civil engineering, standardization and quality control. Shri Sanjay Pant played a crucial role in bringing the revision of the National Building Code of India, namely NBC 2005 and NBC 2016. He has to his credit a number of technical papers written and presented in national and international journals and seminars relating to standardization, consumer protection and quality assurance. Joining him today, our second distinguished speaker is Shri Rajneesh Khosla, the Director and Head of the Mechanical Engineering Department of the Bureau of Indian Standards. At present, Shri Rajneesh Khosla is overseeing the work of 28 sectional committees of the Mechanical Engineering Department involved in standardization activity for various mechanical engineering products. Shri Rajneesh Khosla has more than 20 years of experience in the mechanical engineering sector, and post-joining Bureau of Indian Standards, he has worked in the certification, laboratory, standardization and international relations department of the Bureau of Indian Standards. I will now request both our speakers to kindly take the session forward.
With me, my colleague Rajneesh Khosla, who would be giving a presentation. Before he starts his presentation, let me briefly touch upon the topic of standards development. Why standards are needed? We have large number of literature already available everywhere, internationally, nationally, and then we have journals, periodicals, research articles, latest development at our command in public domain. And but still, why standards become so important, worldwide? And this India, of course, could recognize this as early as 1947, when the Bureau of Indian Standards, the national standards body of the country, was set up, and we have completed 75 years of development of standardization in the country. And these standards essentially are the backbone of all the development process. Whether it is infrastructure development, whether it is a trade or commerce, standards are essential. These are essential for industrial development, these are essential for consumer protection. And why? Because standards are not like ordinary books, or do not reflect a view or opinion of an author. Standards are developed based on the process of consensus. The consensus which is evolved takes care of all the concerns of the stakeholders, be it the manufacturers or industry or the users or the consumers, the consumer organizations, the academicians. These are also important tools for research, because the entire research is based on the fundamentals of the terminology, the test methodology which are developed. Standards form various take various shapes, be it specification or materials, or the quality of the materials or the components, or the test methodology to assess those components or materials or the products or articles or goods, or the codes of practices, good practices that we formulate for how to do a thing or install or erect or demolish or lay or everything. So and then they also set the terminology, which is the language of the professionals, and they can talk about. So standards in essentiality, it takes care of not only products but also services. So it commands the entire space of development, and the standards therefore become very important. We will have a detailed debate and discussion on how standards facilitate trade and commerce, how they are related to WTO Agreement, TBT Agreement, and before that we will have and I will invite Mr. Rajneesh Khosla to have his presentation. I request that we all listen to his presentation carefully, and then at the end of it we will have a discussion on various points. We will have your questions and answers on that. Is it okay? Thank you, Rajneesh. Welcome. So I'll take a seat there so that I can also see your presentation.
Thank you, Sanjay Pant sir. Respected Sri Sanjay Pant, dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. Like sir has already explained that standards are needed, why standards are needed, but in the context of trade, I can say that standards are writing the rules of the trade today by means of technical regulation. I can see that yesterday the last session was on this field only, the technical regulation. So participation in the standard making process is very important, be it manufacturers, be it regulators, be it academicians, be it technocrats, because standards will be formed whether we participate in them or not. But the rules of the trade for us will be written by somebody else. So in order to facilitate trade, we have to participate in standards. So let us see what standards are and how standards are formed. So in the layman's language, we can say the standards are the rules or agreed way of doing things. So by agreed way of doing things, we mean consensus. Like sir has already told that the standards are made by consensus. Or we can say it is the combined wisdom of people with expertise in the subject who know the needs and the concern of the industry. And the work of BIS is to bring all these experts together at a forum where consensus can be achieved, and then the combined wisdom can be brought out as a published document, which is a standard. The official definition of standard as given by ISO is that standard is a document. I have highlighted the key words here, and I would like your attention on them. That standard is a document which is established by consensus, and then it is approved by a recognized body. So here the word document, consensus and recognized body all take a very important meaning to all of them, that provides for common and repeated use, rules, guideline, characteristic activities aimed at achievement of optimum degree of order in a given context. So basically it is standards are instruments that provide solution to repeated and recurring problems, to products as well as services. Standards should be based on the consolidated results of science, technology and experience and aimed at the promotion of optimum community benefit. What are the basic principles of standardization? So the WTO TBT committee met in 2000 and they decided that there are 6 principles on which standardization activity would move forward. So what are these principles and how Bureau of Indian Standard as a national standard body is trying to achieve them? I'll be taking it up. So the first principle is transparency. Transparency is that people who are contributing or participating or stakeholder in the standardization process, they should have easy accessibility of information, work program and opportunity to participate and comment. So the people who are participating, the experts who are participating should get transparent and availability of all the documents that are there. So like when we are having basically the meeting of experts, they are provided all the national, international, all secondary data on the subject so that they can come to an informed consensus. The second is openness, that is participation in standard development open to all. So there should not be any financial constraint that the membership fees is very high and only a few people can contribute, only the MSME cannot participate because of the high fees. So there should not be any restriction in participation. The procedures of how to participate should be publicly available also. The third is impartiality and consensus. So there should not be a specific group of people who are trying to influence the standard in the favor of, say, large-scale industry or industry as such. And decision making should be through consensus as well as scientific and technical knowledge only. The fourth principle is effectiveness and relevance. There is no use of making an obsolete standard. So the standard should be given to the latest technological development and should be put up for periodic review. The maintenance of the standard is as important a job as is the making of the standard. The fifth principle is the coherence, that there are many standards developing organizations in the country, internationally, so there should not be any overlapping or duplication of the work that is being carried out. The same expert should not be forced to participate in 3 or 4 forums, and then that may lead to contradiction. So we should avoid such things. The sixth is a development dimension, that is engaging potentially underrepresented interested parties. Here we have the micro and the consumer groups and the NGOs who are not the consumers, which are not able to represent themselves. So the effort should be made by the standardization body to engage them in the standardization process. If we take the example of Bureau of Indian Standards, what steps Bureau of Indian Standard has taken to ensure that all these 6 principles are followed in the Bureau of Indian Standard? The first is that for easy access, we have put all the documents, all the secondary data, all the documents under development are put on the standards portal, and each and every committee manager or committee member of the committee, the experts, they are provided with a unique login ID from which they can access all the documents. So the access is provided to the committee member to the documents for which he is entitled to give the comments on. There is a real-time program of work in BIS website which is accessible to all. The commenting time is given for whenever a document, a draft document is ready, like I'll be discussing the process, the document is circulated for public commenting. So for every document we give a time of 60 days so that everybody can get access to it. Then the wide circulation documents are put on BIS website. They are also circulated to all the departments, and the stage-wise timelines of documents under development are also provided in order to ensure transparency. For openness, like I said, there should not be any financial consideration for membership, so BIS has no membership fees for joining on participation in standardization work. Anyone who has the expertise may request, and the committee may consider and make him part of the committee or the panel, whatever is applicable. Then the BIS branches are having regular interaction with the stakeholders in the form of Manak Manthans, where all the stakeholders are called in the 41 branches that we have throughout India, and all the emerging standards that are being made, as well as the standards that have come up, revisions that have come up, are taken up by them to discuss all the issues related to the standards, so that the views of all the stakeholders are considered in the standard. We also have provision in the standards portal where anybody, any general public, any expert, any person can just go to the website and they can give a new work item proposal and the justification as well as they can give comments on the existing standards as well. As far as the principle of impartiality and consensus is concerned, equal opportunity is given to all stakeholders. The chairman and the member secretary ensure that there is no lack of opportunities for people from the micro and the small sectors, industry or the consumers, and all stakeholders' comments are taken into consideration while holding the meeting. The decisions are not taken arbitrarily, they are taken based on scientific data, and decision is through consensus building. Now consensus, like most of you must be knowing, is basically general agreement. It does not mean unanimity. So, in the group of people, the experts, the consensus building is the most important process of standardization, and it takes a lot of time. However, it is based on consensus that we make standards. The effectiveness and relevance. For the effectiveness and the relevance, the standard are need-based standard. The standardization cells have been formed at various association and ministry level, which give us input regarding the need of the standard, and through the input, the sectional committees which make the standard then start the work of implementation of the standard. BIS had also started a structured process which is called the Standard National Action Plan, which we first initiated in 2019. It was based on the Indian National Standardization Strategy document recommendation of the Ministry of Commerce of 2018, and based on it we had developed a Standard National Action Plan. It involved a huge rigorous stakeholder consultation with the ministries, with the association, with the consumers, with the stakeholders, and based on that the gap areas were identified in the standardization process. There was also a mechanism that was involved to get regular feedback, to address the concerns of the participant regarding participation in standardization activity, to address the difficulties in implementation of standard, and to address the capacity building needs of the stakeholders. So it is a very comprehensive document. It is available on the BIS website. I will request you, whenever you find time, just go to the document. It will give you a very good insight on the fields of areas that we have identified for various areas, and the subjects that we have identified, and the priority that we have assigned to it. The effectiveness and relevance is also checked through, like I told you, the maintenance of the standard. We take up the maintenance of the standard for 5 years. For IT related standard, it is maximum 3 years. It can be taken up again also. The maximum period is 5 and 3 years. So there is a very scientific process that we adopt for the review, which is called the action research based approach, which is a approach which has very active consultation is held with the stakeholders, especially the manufacturer, the R&D, the technocrats, before reviewing the standard, so that the standard is up to the mark and is satisfying the need of the day. There is regular interaction with the ministry, regulator and associations to get the feedback on standards. So regarding the coherence, the BIS has developed a standard developing organization recognition scheme. As you know, there are many standards making organizations in the country who are making standards on various niche areas. So to avoid that there is duplication and overlapping, so BIS has come up with a standard developing organization scheme where we recognize the SDOs and we have regular interaction with them to see that there is no overlapping or there is coherence of standard. BIS ensures that there is representation of the MSMEs and consumer group in our committee. There is regular capacity building program that we have for experts so that they can know how to participate in the standardization activity. And we also have a sector-wise awareness and implementation program for industry with focus on MSMEs. This is how BIS is satisfying all these 6 principles of standardization development. Then we have the WTO TBT Agreement, and there is an Annex 3, which is a WTO TBT Code of Good Practices for Preparation, Adoption and Application of Standards. So I'll just read the Article 4, which I think each one of you must have already read, being an active participant in the WTO TBT activities, that the members shall ensure that the central government standardizing bodies accept and comply with the Code of Good Practices for preparation, adoption, application of standard in Annex 3 to this agreement, and standardization bodies that have accepted and are complying with the Code of Good Practices shall be acknowledged by the member as complying with the principles of this agreement. So there are a few substantive provisions that are given in the WTO TBT agreement regarding how the standardization activity is to be carried out. So in this, the first is that the standard that we are made should not give preference to any particular national country, so it should not be less favorable to outside countries. So BIS takes care of that. We do not put any clause in the standard that is for the national and international. We keep them at par. We don't give any preference to the Indian consumer or Indian manufacturer as such. The standardization body shall ensure that standards are prepared, adopted, and applied with a view of creating, with the effect of creating unnecessary obstacle to international trade. So none of the standards have anything related to trade given in them to avoid any reference, and we ensure that no such requirements are there in the standard which may be obstacle to international trade. Wherever international standard exists, they must be taken care of. Like I told you, whenever a new standard is made, it is the duty of the member secretary to provide all the secondary data related to all the international standards, regional standards, and the journals that are available on the subject and that are provided to the member for taking into consideration. Then, with a view of harmonizing standard on a wide basis, standardization body shall play a full part. Limit is for preparation of international standards. So, BIS ensures that in the international standardization process, we are a member of ISO and IEC, International Organization for Standardization, and International Electrotechnical Commission, which take care of. IEC is basically making standards on electrotechnical subjects, and the other subjects the ISO is making. So we ensure that the representation from Indian industries are there in ISO and IEC to take care of India's point of view whenever international standard is being made, so that when the international standard is made, it is easier for the national standard body to adopt them. And like I told you, we are already taking steps to avoid duplication and overlap of work. Then, yes, so this is very important point, that standardization body shall specify standards based on product requirements in terms of performance rather than design or descriptive characteristic. So this is the new way what we are how we are formulating standards. The standard should not kill the innovation. So usually the performance characteristics are defined in the standard only where it is very essential to the point of view of safety that the design or descriptive characteristic will be given. In, I think, most of the majority of the cases, only performance is given in the standards, and the manufacturing part, the innovation part is left for the manufacturer to take care of. So like I already told you, the next point, that BIS has a real-time program of work, so we don't wait for every 6 months to publish. We have a real-time program of work for each department of standardization that we have, that is available for all. So BIS gives a period of 60 days for public commenting for standards before the standards are published, so that the public and the international as well as national stakeholders can give their comments. Then whenever a party requests us, we provide them a copy of our standards. And whenever wherever we receive any comments from other standardization body or any request is received, we promptly reply to that. And we provide a copy to all the members whenever the request is made. So we are complying with the Annexure 3 of the WTO TBT Agreement. I think without doubt I can say that we are maybe over complying with that, and we take it very seriously that we comply with all the provision of the WTO TBT Code of Good Practice. So now we come to the slide that how the standards are made in BIS. So for that we have at the top of the notch, we have the division councils. So we have the 16 division council, like you can see here. We have the civil engineering, chemical, electrotechnical, food and agriculture. So under these heads, division councils, we are making standards. All the standards, 22,000 standards we have, more than 22,000 standards have been formulated by BIS, out of which about 10,000 standards are product standards, the others are on code of practices, terminology, various test methods, and code of practices, special publications. So we have more than 22,000 standards, and each of the standard is made under any of the 16 division council, or you can say field of areas that are there. So what is the basic function of the division council? It is basically an advisory body. It basically constitutes members of repute from that area, from the academia, from the industry, and these are the people who advise on the subject areas that are to be taken up for standardization in the respective field. The real work of standard is done at the sectional committee level. So the division council, depending on the area, will then form the sectional committees. They approve the proposals of work, that any of the work proposal that is received from either public, ministries, R&D centers, laboratories. They are first taken up, they are basically studied, their relevance is established, and then it is put up to the division council for their approval. Direct the sectional committee to undertake the approved work, advise on matter related to R&D. So basically division councils have the role of supervisory as well as advisory nature. They study the work of international organization and their committees in standard formulation, and they recommend on the extent and manner of participation in the standardization activity. They advise on the implementation of established standard, and they receive and deal with the activity report. So each sectional committee would provide a activity report of what they are doing, and then they will deal with the matter. And they will also make recommendation to the governing council, which is a body above them, if they need any resources or help at the policy level. So the division, like I told you, the division council has many sectional committees. So the division council, suppose the division council is civil engineering, so it may have CED01, CED02, CED03 as the sectional committees, like CED02 may be on cement and concrete, or MED20 may be on pumps, MED01 may be on boilers, MED03 may be on refrigeration, air conditioning. Similarly, so these are the, under the division councils we have various sectional committees under each division council. So who constitute the sectional committee? So sectional committee, we have consumers, we have regulators, we have industry, laboratory, academia, technologists, experts, and the BIS person would be the member secretary. So basically BIS is acting as secretariat. So BIS does not make standard as such. They do not, you can just do not think that a BIS scientist will sit and write all the standards, because he may not have all the expertise. So basically they act as member secretary. We provide the secretariat service. We provide a platform where all the experts come, meet, and reach a consensus, and based on that the standards are formed. So like I told you, the division councils are 16. So we have in the 16 division council 375 sectional committees, and if some work is to be given by the sectional committee or division council, a specific subject, then we have subcommittees and then panels or working groups, which can be formed by either sectional committees and subcommittees as well. So if you see where do we get the power to make the standards? The BIS Act and rules are there which empower BIS, and BIS is given the stature of the national standard body. The standardization activity of BIS are carried out under the provision of section 10 and 11 of the BIS Act and as prescribed under Rule 22 and 30. So what does the BIS Act say? Well, just that BIS under section 10(1), the standard established by the bureau shall be Indian standards. So this is very important. So no other organization can claim that they are making Indian standards. So being the national standard body, only the standards that are made by BIS can be called Indian standards. So as you can read section 2, it can establish, publish, review and adopt, recognize and support the R&D activities as well. And so we have got legal backing for that. So what is the basic process of standard formulation? So it is basically a project kind of approach where the activities are broken down in various projects. So the first proposal is the proposal, or whenever we get a request either through online platform or offline or emails or from the ministry, any stakeholder or general public. So the first process is that the proposal will be got from the public. Then the group of experts would be constituted who will be making the working draft. This working draft will then be taken to the sectional committee, and once the sectional committee approves the draft, it is called the prelim draft, and it will be then circulated for public commenting, which is called the wide circulation stage. Once the comments of the wide circulation stage are received and resolved by the sectional committee, then a final draft is formulated, and then the division council adopts the standard and then it is published. So this is the basic process which is adopted, and there are various names that are given to it, that is proposal stage, preparatory stage, committee stage, approval stage and publication stage. So like I told you, we take it up as a project. So a project is any work intended to lead to issue of a new amended or revised national standard. So project shall be undertaken only if it is accepted by the sectional committee. So this is the project approach that we take while making the standard. So the program of work of a sectional committee, like I told you, there was mention of program work in the WTO TBT Agreement and previously also. So it gives the complete set of documents at various stages for that sectional committee. That what are the documents that they have taken up, what are the documents that are in the proposal stage, what are the documents in the approval stage, what are the documents in the committee stage, and what are the documents in the publication stage. All will be listed, and the timelines will also be listed here. So under the proposal and the preparatory stage, what activities carry out? So like I told you, any person, government, ministry, consumer organization, industry association, professional bodies, they can submit a proposal to the bureau for establishment, withdrawal, amendment or revision of standard in writing. So there is a proper performa that is there, and the performa is basically seeking information on the various relevant issues, that why this, suppose we are proposing a new work item proposal. So why this? Because BIS would then be investing a huge amount of time and resources to this, and a lot of experts will also be working on them. So basically we want to ensure that this is basically the principle of relevance comes into picture, whether the subject is of relevance in the emerging market or is relevant to the country. If we basically put up so much of resources into it. So once the relevance is established, then the next stage comes, which is the proposal is assigned to the division council. It is accepted by the division council based on the, like I told you, the evaluation report that is submitted by the member secretary of BIS, and the working draft of the proposal is then prepared by a panel of experts under the concerned sectional committee. So this is called the working draft. So they would then make a working draft on the subject. So based on the urgency of the matter, the priorities will be assigned. So very bulky document, voluminous document, like sir has told, the National Building Code, which is, sir, how many pages does it contain, sir?
2,250.
So when such large voluminous work is involved, then it is bound to take much more time. And suppose there is a need for standards in a very urgent way, like in the case of Corona, there was an urgent need for having the standards on the PPE and the mask, and they were made on priority one on a very urgent basis. So depending on the on the urgency of the work, so we have the priority 1, 2, 3 is assigned, and the working draft, once it is made, is circulated to the as a prelim draft to the committee, sectional committee. So the sectional committee reviews the draft, whether it is complete, whether any need is there for addition of some points or subjects in it, and then it is circulated among the section committee members for a period of not less than 3 weeks, so that they can give their comment, they can go to the document, they can give their views on that. So once a consensus is achieved in the section committee, like I told you, the consensus principle is very important in ISO and IEC, because a lot of countries are involved, more than 120 countries are involved, so they have adopted the voting approach where 2/3 voting is taken as thus, whereas where national standards are there, where we have the consensus approach, where through consensus making within the committee, we take the things forward. The time schedule for the project, like I told, we provided timelines also that we have decided based on the priority in the stage. Then once the draft is approved by the committee, then we circulate it to the for public commenting. For public commenting, we take it very seriously. The public commenting, we put the document on the BS website. We have a whole list of WC, you can say a list or directory of emails, which includes all the manufacturers, consumer organization, industry associations. So we will circulate this working document to all of these people for their comments. Once we receive the comments of the people, then the section committee will consider all the comments. They will see whether they need to be incorporated or they can be they are not necessary. And once the comments are incorporated and the consensus is reached, then the draft is finalized, and then it is sent for the division council. The division council adopts the standard, and then it is published as a national standard. Once the standard gets notified in the Gazette, it is established as an Indian standard. So BIS standardization process, like I have already told you, follows the WTO TBT Code of Good Practices. So what does the standard contain? So a typical standard would have a foreword. So the foreword would give what is the history of the standard, whether it has been adopted from international standard, or basically some help of some document or journal has been taken while formulating the standard. The scope will be giving the basically the boundary of the standard, that what does the standard have. Then the references will come where the national and the international standards that have been quoted inside the standard, they would be given. Then we have the terminology so that the experts do not differ when they talk about a subject. When we talk about the same thing, so that the definition of the terminology is very important. And then the classification of various things. So suppose we are talking about any subject, so it may have various varieties, so the classification will come into picture. So like I told you, that manufacturing process is not given. We make mostly, majority of the standards are basically made on performance based. So only where safety can be ensured and is of priority, very essential, like in the case of LPG cylinders which are used, where the design is specified by the oil company. So the same is also referred in the standard. In most of the cases, we are making mostly performance-based standards. So the requirements, chemical, physical, mechanical tests are provided, testing methods are specified, sampling techniques are given, and then packaging and the marking requirements are provided. These are also very important, especially the marking requirements, to give information to the consumers regarding what is the product, what are the ingredients that are used, what are the processes that are used. So then comes the maintenance of the standard. So making a standard is good, we make a standard, but the maintenance of the standard is of very vital thing so that it remains relevant like I told you, every 5 years in case of normal standard, in IT related standard in a period of maximum 3 years, and in other cases maximum 5 years, we review the standard and see whether it is still complying with the country's need and requirements. So how do we take it? We take the action research based project approach, and where we take into consideration the change in technology that is there, whether any update in the test method is there, any R&D work has taken place, and all the things are taken into consideration while reviewing the standard. So why this review is done? Because of the principle of effective and relevance that we refer to WTO, that the standard even after 5 years or 3 years should remain relevant. Obsolete standards do not serve any purpose, and we do not want to make standards that are used by nobody. So when it is to be reviewed, so before the completion of 5 years, based on technological updation, change in international scenarios, comment received from stakeholders, change in regulation. So like I told you, periodic review once in 5 years, and for IT related standards, not more than 3 years. So depending on the outcome of the review, what are the various scenarios that may come up. So we may have reaffirmation where we find that the standard is appropriate and does not need any change. Then if some changes are required, small changes, then we go for the amendment and reaffirmation. And if we consider that the changes required are phenomenal and large amount of changes are there, so we take it as a new project, and the revision of the whole standard is taken up. Sometimes we find that the technology has become obsolete and the standard is then withdrawn. So, like I told you, one of the parameters is when there are small changes that are required, we bring out the amendments. Then the amendments can be of the following types, and it may be a editorial change which may require a corrigendum type amendment, or a technical amendment which alters the technical requirement, and this requires the approval of the sectional committee, chairman of the division council before it can be published. So the chairman of the sectional committee plays a very important role. He is to be neutral, and he should guide the work of the sectional committee where the actual standards are being made. So the chairmen of the sectional committees are appointed by the bureau or the division council. A bureau is the body that is above the division council. It also has representation from all the various industries as well as ministries and the consumer organization. And the criteria is that he should be from a neutral organization, should not favor any particular group of people, and biodata credential of the expert proposed for appointment as chairman need to be available to the appointing authority. So the appointing authority goes to the credentials, and if the most technically suitable as well as neutral person is selected as the chairman. So the responsibility of the chairman is that they act in purely national capacity, divesting himself from the organization point of view. So he does not represent his organization when he is the chairman, guide the member secretary in carrying out his duty, conduct meetings with a view to reaching agreement, and ensure at meetings that all points are expressed and adequately summed up. And basically he ensures that all the process of standardization, all the principles are followed, and all of these things are basically taken care of. So regarding the members, so we prefer that the membership shall be offered to all India state organization in preference to individual firm or institution, so that the consolidated view of the MSMEs and the large scale and the small scale and the medium scale is basically incorporated in the standard. Because sometimes individual firms would give their individual firms point of view, whereas we want the industry's point of view. So we prefer that the association of industries from the all India level or consumer organization for that sake as well. We also offer membership to individual expert, but this happens only when the suitable person is not forthcoming from a representative or a firm or an institution. So what are the responsibilities of the members? Individual committee members share the Bureau's duty of and should not withhold or misrepresent factors pertinent to the scope of the standard, and they should follow the proper ethics and the proper principles that are enshrined in the Code of Good Practice. So I think these points are self-explanatory. So there are provisions where if the members are not satisfied that their point of view has been heard, so there is a mechanism where the problem may be taken by the head of the department or DDG level, where these things can be taken up and then adequate corrective actions can be taken. So we also have a standard formulation manual. So people who join BIS and are new to standardization activity, all these principles and all these facts and the drafting and the ISO IC directive are included part of this, so that people are well versed as member secretaries before they join as member secretary in the standard formulation section committee. So the basic thing that we need to ensure is that the standard must be needed, implementable, timely, acceptable and correct. That is, there is no use of the standard if they are making standards which are not needed. Once they are made, the industry cannot implement them. They have been made in such a long time that the technology has become obsolete. So we need to take care of all these factors. So what are the criticisms that we get usually from the standard? That the standards are not flexible, the unrelated to condition in particular places, often arbitrary, developed and used without regard to economic implications, and they inhibit innovation. So these are the criticism that we usually get. So we take the criticism very positively, and to remove these problems, we have introduced that we will do wider consultation, wider consensus. We will make the standard based on consumer needs. We will ensure that they are performance-oriented standards rather than design-based or manufacturing process-based is being specified in the standard. It is more performance-oriented, and they are responsive to the local conditions. So let us recapitulate what we have seen in this presentation: how to choose the subject and its aspect, appropriate time frames, feedback, standards, the standard formulation process, and the progress. Thank you so much. So I think I've tried to cover the standardization process. So I think if you have any questions, I think DBT standardization, and I would be very happy to answer.
If anybody has any questions, we'll take it up now. So just a second, we'll do the setup.
approved by Bureau before becoming regulation by FSSI?
See, BIS formulates standards in almost all domains, including the food and agriculture sector. So far BIS has been making all these standards, the complete standard, not only safety standards. Safety is one part of the entire product standard. So the BIS has been making all these standards for food safety, including food safety so far. But recently a decision has been taken by the government that food related standards shall be made only by FSSAI. So that transition period is going on right now. So we may continue to formulate standards on test methodologies and terminologies, codes of good practices, all other standards except product standards on food.
Thank you.
So to avoid any kind of overlap.
So one more question. In my last slide, I have seen you have quickly paused. BIS standards voluntary oblique mandatory. What that slide means, because standards are voluntary. When it becomes regulation, only it becomes mandatory.
By the provisions of the BIS Act, all Indian standards formulated are voluntary in nature. These are not mandatory. But a standard can be made mandatory through 2-3 processes. One is through a contract between the contracting parties. A standard can be mandated as part of the contract. Number 2, through reference in a legislation. Its requirement may be mandated. For example, industrial safety helmets in Mines Act, it is mandated. So they only need to use ISI marked, BIS certified, complying to IS 2925 helmets for their mining work. And third thing is through issuance of a special quality control order. Like we have quality control order for cement, that no cement in the country can be manufactured or sold or stored for the purpose of sale which is not complying to Indian standard and does not carry the BIS standard mark, that is ISI mark.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good morning. Sir, I have a question regarding the harmonization. We have so much emphasized on harmonization, and we see that most of the BIS standards are having some similarity with the ISO standards. When it comes in terms of Indian standard and Indian specificity, could you please explain what are the basic differences which we observe when we harmonize with ISO standard, and what are the major differences are in there?
See, when we make standard, it is our responsibility to see what is happening worldwide. One of the happening is availability of international standards, that is formulated by ISO or IEC. If an ISO standard is available, we are required to first consider the available ISO standard. And one way is we adopt the ISO standard as it is. Second is, if we find that the ISO standard has given certain requirements which are to be specified by the specific countries, the standard themselves say these requirements, somewhere in either it is by design or sometimes the consensus is not reached. They say somehow these requirements would need to be specified by the country. Then you need to have your own requirement based on your own local conditions. The third thing could be that you largely comply with the ISO standards, but there are issues of local materials, maybe the local technology and skills which are not addressed in the ISO standard, and there is concerns of safety or environment or protection or security, because of which also you may need to make your own standard, largely complying with the ISO standard to the extent possible, but having your own requirement for the issues that I have mentioned. So these are the considerations.
So I had a quick question, but first thank you very much. That was very useful.
Thank you.
And it was interesting because yesterday we had the discussion about standards at the end of the day, and this dovetailed very nicely with that discussion, particularly on the link between standards and regulations. So one question I had, it's a small point, so two questions. One is when you talk about consensus, I think the concept of consensus in the standards world is slightly different than how we describe consensus at the WTO. In the WTO, consensus means everyone has to agree, there cannot be one opposition. But I think in the standards, maybe both with respect to Indian standards but also to ISO, it's a bit different. You don't have necessarily to have everyone in agreement. So maybe you could comment on that. The other comment is with respect to the three, it was actually in response to one of the questions, how a standard becomes mandatory. Because as we discussed yesterday, when a standard is mandatory, seen from the eyes of WTO, it's a technical regulation. That's the way it is. So on the third type, you mentioned quality control order. That's unclear to me.
It is basically another word for technical regulation.
Yeah, but my question was more on how you get there, because if you make a standard mandatory through a quality control order, how can you ensure that the rest of the world, so to speak, has had an opportunity to comment on the requirements of the standard before it became mandatory through the notification obligations, etc.? So those two small points.
So on first is on consensus. See, consensus, I'll give you an example. He has already explained what is consensus all about. We developed consensus. We arrive at one decision. We are differing in our views, but we agree to come to a common decision. That is consensus. A group of students after their examinations, they want to enjoy. They want to go to movie. Some to romantic. Some want to go for a fighting scene. Some other kind of. They have different views. There are different movies in cinema halls, but they want to go together. And they finally go to one movie, which has little romance, little fighting also, and whatever it is. So they arrive at what is called consensus. So they are all happy finally. So this is how the consensus is developed. It is mutual give and take, understanding, discreet lobbying, and finally arriving at a common decision, which was not everybody's decision. Maybe a decision of some of them, but now has become everybody's decision. This is how consensus is developed. That is your first. What was the second question?
Technical regulations.
Yeah, you explain this.
Sir, like the international practice is there, BIS does not make any standard as mandatory. It is done by the regulators, by the ministries of Government of India. They follow the due process specified by the WTO. The technical regulation is first notified by the Ministry of Commerce to the WTO website for a period of 60 days, and then all the comments are invited from all the countries, and then they are basically answered, and once I think all the comments have been resolved, and then the period of 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, depending on the time it will take for the conformity assessment process, people to accept the conformity assessment process and go through the process. That is given by the ministry. So BIS has no role in it. Yes, we interact with the ministries during stakeholder consultation and during to provide them the technical input. However, this is being done by the regulator. BIS does not make any standard mandatory. All BIS standards are voluntary in nature. By the technical regulations, by the ministries, following the due process given specified by WTO of WTO notifications and other things. This after the whole process is completed, then the ministries issue a technical regulation, which in India we call the quality control order, and then the standard becomes mandatory. BIS on its own cannot make any standards mandatory. I hope, sir, I have clarified the question.
Good morning, sir. I have a question which is particularly for the review stage. As you said, like review is for the effectiveness and relevance of the standard BIS may So my question is, normally the time period for the review, what you have told is 5 years or 3 years, and maximum is 5 years, and within 3 years you review. And the review is based on the changes which need to be adopted, either the coming from the stakeholder or from the international market, whatever. So, for example, ICT tool after COVID, it is in practice. So normally, what is the time frame? Like 3 years is the maximum is 5, and 3 is like minimum. So normally when we review, what is the minimum time if it needs to adopt immediately? For example, I am specific talking about ICT.
Now, what was explained is that there is a need for a systemic review. All standards, because the technologies change, and therefore, in case of ICT, it should be not more than 3 years. That is, standard should be subjected to a review, and similarly, all other standards not more than 5 years. And in the process, when we review these standards, and we can be faster, or we can have a slower approach depending on priority 1 and 2 and 3, it was said. And we can do a faster job also within, as you said, if it is the change is important, it needs to be brought up urgently, it can be done within 6 months also. The entire process of wide circulation, public commenting, consideration, finalization, publication.
We can say it is fast track mode, but it
Yes.
will be adopted
Yes.
more, like as per the relevancy of the requirement.
Depending on the need, see, when we formulate a standard, this procedure is followed. When we review and then decide to revise the standard, again the same procedure is to be followed. Even for amendment, same procedure is to be followed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, as you told that some food-related standards are going to FSSI, it is in transition. So FSSI, as I know, is a regulatory body. So when FSSI will form the standard, food standard, it will be mandatory.
So now it is these questions are being answered. If BIS slowly stops formulation of standards on food products, somebody has to make those standards, and there will not be any gap for that matter. So they have to make standards. If those standards are part of the regulation, as you have rightly said, these are regulations and not a voluntary standard, which are voluntary standards are also subjected to conformity assessment, third party conformity assessment, like BIS standard certification. So we are still, they are working out. There are joint committees of BIS and FCI which are working out these modalities, and I hope there will be voluntary standards by FCI, without which those certification would be difficult. So, but then these are being worked out.
Sir, good morning. There is one question with respect to the standard revision. I think it was told that 20,000 standards are formulated in BAS, and product standards are 10,000, almost 50% of it. And it is being reviewed once in 5 years, and IT standard once in 3 years. So I would like to know what is the trigger point of standard, because there are many standards which, almost in circulation every 5 years, many standards comes for revision. So how the trigger point is there, and who is responsible for the triggering? Which committee is responsible for that?
Trigger point for revision of standards?
Revision of standards.
No, see, there is a requirement under BIS regulations to review all standards at least every 5 years. That is a legal requirement. So that is being complied with, that is there. But then, even otherwise, within the 5 years, there can be so many trigger points. A comment from a stakeholder, a comment from the BIS technical committee, sectional committee members, and from the government, or from BIS licensee who is holding a BIS certification license, the comment, or suo motu the committee identifies certain issues which it should handle. So these all keep on going. But a formal review process is done at the end of 5 years, But these trigger points, they keep on happening. Every committee, these issues. So there are, if we see the typical agenda of a meeting, there will be a drafts coming up for finalization. Another set of draft standards are coming for approval for wide circulation. Another set of drafts are coming for issuing in as a preliminary draft. Other set of subjects are being discussed for preparation of wide working drafts. And there will be another subject which is consideration of new subjects for taking up for standardization. And then another item on comments on published Indian standards. So all these are parallel activities which have, and then another item on work at international level. So we have to keep on monitoring what is happening in the corresponding ISO or IEC committee at this stage. So these some 10 points keep on happening in every meeting of the sectional committee, and we hold 2 to 3 meetings every year of the every sectional committee. You know. So these come, so motto of these things do also happen.
Good morning, sir. Sir, I think you just mentioned this as well. So there are a lot of indigenous cottage industries who do not follow standards, and you mentioned that there is a committee for new subjects as well. What is the procedure and the timeline does a new subject follow, and like how much time does it take to come up with a standard for a new industry, or what is the trigger point for you to consider an industry for it to be standardized?
There are two different things. You said there is an industry or a cottage industry or some industry or who may not follow a standard,
Yes.
may need a standard, all those things. See, the standards are not for any particular level of industry. Standards are applicable to all. First of all, standards are formulated as voluntary standards. So voluntarily, anybody can use the contents of those standards to upgrade themselves. Standards are, as we discussed, can be used by regulators in regulating the quality of a product. That's number one. Standards can be used by government departments in their government activities, their construction activity, their purchase activity. These can be done by private agencies in their own programs, their purchase programs. This can be used by academicians in imparting education to the standards, students in civil engineering, mechanical engineering, electrotechnical engineering, or metallurgical engineering, or other IT areas. These can be used by researchers as the fundamentals, the test laboratories as the basis for testing and analysis. So standards are formulated for all. They are used by anybody and everybody, for their different purposes. Anybody can use for, if you want to know, if somebody is vigilant enough, even a common consumer, you can see I am using this air conditioner, whether there is an Indian standard or air conditioner, how much which kind of refrigerants it permits and all those things, by mechanic was saying so. So it can be used for that matter by anybody, indeed. As you said, for cottage industry or for that matter any industry or anybody wants to know about availability of Indian standard. As Rajneesh has mentioned, the BIS website has got a tab on standards. If you go there, you can see a drop-down menu where you can see you can go to each department and see its program work, which are the technical committee, which are standards so far available, which are draft standard available as preliminary draft, which are the draft standard as available in wide circulation draft for public commenting, and all those things are available. Once you are aware or you go to know your standards and type the keyword and see which are the standards available on this subject, and once you are sure, or even otherwise you have a query that whether a standard on this subject is available or not available, or you feel that it is not available, BIS technical committee would take up the cause for development of a new standard on that subject area. Depending on the urgency of the subject matter, it will assign the priority 1, 2 or 3, and it may formulate the standard as early as 6 months or even earlier, as we said in the critical cases of mask or PPE in COVID times, or it may take from a year to 2 years, depending on the complexity of the subject matter, the information, the technical information which is available to draft a standard, the knowledge base, the status of the industry itself, the quality of information which is available. So we are ready to develop standards as many as standards which are needed in newer areas.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you for your presentation. I am Venkat from Department of Pharmaceuticals, and my question is regarding medical devices. So in the presentation we saw that there is a dedicated divisional council for medical equipment and hospitals. So, but we already have an existing regulatory framework under CDSCO. So how are the roles and responsibilities defined between BIS and CDSCO, and what is the criteria for inclusion of medical devices in the work program, and what is the established mechanism of interaction between BIS and CDSCO?
The CDSO makes standards. BIS has a medical and hospital department which is making voluntary standards, and we have CDSO as member in most of the committees. So it is for, like I told you, we make voluntary standards. It is for CDSO to see and advise if they want any standard made, or they want to use any standards in their technical regulation. So BIS as such is not making any regulations or making any mandatory standard, like I have already clarified. So we make voluntary standard which can be used, like sir said, between the industries for voluntary certification, or may be used by the ministries if they deem fit that this is required for the technical regulation. So depending on the need of CDSO, CDSO may select any of our voluntary standard for bringing out a technical regulation. So there is, we are in constant touch with CDSO. CDSO is part of our technical committees, and in some cases chairmen also come from CDSO. So there is, like I told you, it is for the ministries and the regulators to decide whether which standards they want. There is no mechanism as such that BIS can itself decide that we want to make these standards as mandatory.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
I have two questions basically. The question number one is whether all the standards published by BIS will go for gazette notification or any specific standards. That is question number one. Question number two is, while discussing about the principle of standardization, there is a point regarding regular meeting of SDOs with respect to principle number 5.
Regular meetings of
SDOs. Just can you tell a few examples of SDOs in which BIS
What was your first question?
whether all standards will go for gazette notification?
Yes. By definition, a document becomes a standard only, is established as an Indian standard if it is notified in the Gazette of India. So all have to be gazetted. And if you want to withdraw a standard, you have to denotify. Again, it has to go into the Gazette. So that is a requirement. Regarding SDOs, see, I'll give you some example to make you understand. Idea is that we do not duplicate standards development. The SDOs at national level, these are the standards developing organizations other than BIS who are formulating their own standards, and at national level. For example, there is an organization called RDSO, Research, Design and Standards Organization, Ministry of Railways, which makes specific standards for railways. So BIS does not duplicate those standards. That's number one. But for quality of steel, they would refer to Indian standard. But rails may be theirs, but the steel quality used in that. Wagons may be their standard, but the steel quality used in the fabrication of wagons will be Indian standard. So all fundamental standards. Similarly, there is an Indian Roads Congress under Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, which makes standards on road, bridges, expressways, highways, culverts and all those things. But these standards, but the cement that they will refer to Indian standard, aggregates, steel reinforcement bar, and all fundamental concrete design, concrete mix design, fundamental standards would still come. So there are a few standards developing organization. Their job is not duplicated by BIS. So there is always a one nation, one standard. They make their own standard, but because we have all fundamental standards already made, because as Rajneesh mentioned, we have more than 22,000. So all fundamental standards are already in place, but specific standards are made by some of these SBUs, which is also we have jointly working with them, and we have interaction with them. So we try to, and in fact, as Rajneesh has mentioned, we have a scheme for recognition of SBUs. You know, when we recognize those SBUs have an opportunity to upgrade their standards as Indian standard. So there may be in future, you may start getting information that there is an IS/RDSO standard, IS/IRC standard. So that scheme has been launched, and even RDSO has been recognized. Directorate of Standardization, Ministry of Defense, who also make joint service specification, JSS, they have also been recognized. So we would not like to duplicate the work because it's a huge cost developing standards.
So I had a question regarding sustainability. If there's any thinking in the direction of carbon emission reduction related standards. There was a talk that was recently organized in the WTO about decarbonization standards, and if BIS is doing something in that direction, if you would comment on that.
Sustainability. On sustainability, of course, we have a mandate to support compliance to Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. You know, many of our standards, in fact standards of any country, have the capacity to support some of these SDGs, you know, whether in terms of clean water or in terms of poverty alleviation or zero hunger, or so standards have this capacity. There are standards on food, agriculture, infrastructure, buildings, you know, energy conservation. So many things are happening. So the standards have the capacity to influence. So what we have decided, we have examined the entire approach, and we are now working for identifying the SDGs which can be influenced. In fact, what is going to be the impact of a process which the standard professes, and whether it is a low impact, sustainability, carbon footprint, as water footprint, as you have mentioned. So what kind of impact does this industry make, and therefore can we say that the energy to be used in manufacture, if it is a sustainable source of energy, or for example solar power, and therefore in each standard we are trying to address the compliance to SDGs through the provisions of these standards. And first we are in the process of identifying the impact that particular standard or the contents of the standards are making on the sustainability. So we have made a concept paper on that, and if required we can share with you also.
I should be the last. Is there anyone? Good afternoon, good morning, sir. I have a couple of questions, very basic questions. Actually, the formulation of from the presentation and the deliberations, what we can understand, that formulation of standards is an integral part of the product development in terms of raw materials, whatever it may be. Now, standard formulation process, we have gone through the presentations. It is a time-consuming process, I think. Then, I am from the tea sector, sir. Tea sector, we are already referring to your QCO, that quality control order.
Tea sector, you mentioned?
Yeah, plantations. QCO, we are already referring to. Whether your standards are voluntary, we can take, adopt or take something from your QCOs for adoption or something. Because it is already in your website, quality control order, but whenever the ministry wants to know from us that QCO for the food and beverage sector, have you formulated something?
I don't know if you have got correctly. See, you want, can standards be utilized for making QCOs for tea sector?
QCS for tea sector, yes.
Standards.
But because you are giving consultancies to the industries across all sectors. So, in terms of formulation of standards for the food and beverage sector, do you have any QCOs?
No, see, there are two aspects, as he has very clearly explained. There are standards. Standards are formulated by national standards body. These are voluntary in nature. There is another set which is called regulations. Regulations are mandated, they are mandatory, they are compulsory. The regulations can be formed without referring to any standard.
No,
by giving certain stipulation as it is, it can have some of the stipulations of the standard as part of the regulation. It can demand, as I said, in quality control order, for example, for cement or electrical appliances, compliance to entire Indian standard. So all the three ways the regulation can be brought. So it is for the regulator, for experts like you, to use our standards for any purposes whatsoever you want.
Because standards support regulations.
Yes. That is
the first thing.
That is there.
Same thing that in terms of third-party conformity assessment in the international trade, do you have that mandate, third-party conformity?
No, we have the mandate for third-party certification. We give BIS certification for various products and services, and our popular mark, BIS standard mark, ISI mark, you may all be aware. So that's what BIS does. For international trade, it is little different. That is the mutual recognition of the countries. So I think there is other bodies like EPEDA which are involved in trade certification. So BIS certification is not specific for trade.
And in terms of laboratories, you don't have?
We have our own laboratories which serve our certification activity, because in the process of our BIS certification against Indian standard, for those products, the products have to be tested to check compliance, for which we have laboratories. Where we do not have facilities, or more facilities are required, products are overflowing, we approve the outside laboratories, also recognize those laboratories, and we take their services for BIS certification purposes.
So you do have any collaboration with the EIC, Export Inspection Council?
Yeah, they are part of our stakeholders for development of standards. So they influence our standards.
Okay.
We want our standards to be influenced by all.
We are having talks with them.
Yes.
This mutual recognition.
Yes. You can rope in Indian standards. Wherever you find that it will promote export, it will help, or you want the standards to be modified for propagating any export, or if you come to know that in the process of your trade and commerce, you come to know certain requirement which Indian standards should also have. So standards would immediately respond to that.
Mana, we are trying to achieve something that our testing results here should be accepted across some geographies in the export world, so that we will avoid some testing on their shores. Our testing report should be accepted for clearance of the cargoes.
That is desirable, yeah.
Actually, there are various, I think Ministry of Commerce has various delegations from foreign countries, where the discussion regarding mutual recognition of mark, each other mark, or standards. For that, I think harmonization of standard is what is the first point that is to be done. So that discussions keep on happening. However, these are basically long processes, because each country, that is why international organizations like ISO and IC come into the picture, where at least we would have one standard, one test throughout the world. So, but that we are yet to reach that point where all the products have the same standard being followed by the country of which wants to get things exported and the country which is making the product.
Actually, sir, our exporters have been facing tremendous problem in clearing their cargoes in some geographies like EU, USA, Japan, and all this. There is mutually recognition principles based on acceptance of our lab.
Yes, sir. I think in the FTAs that I think are being discussed, I think free trade agreements, these points are considered and they have it in the agenda point where mutual recognition of each other's standardization and certification schemes, conformity assessment schemes are taken into consideration. But these happen only when the FTAs are implemented and are enforced. Right now, BIS usually is part of the stakeholder consultation when FTAs happen. But as you know that with the European countries, the FTA is under negotiation for many years now, but yet to be finalized. So maybe when it is finalized, you can forward your concerns to the Ministry of Commerce, and maybe that can also be taken during the discussion.
I would like to know the BIS is a party to this.
So whenever, not every discussion, yes, but wherever this agenda point where mutual recognition of scheme or harmonization of standard is taken up, we are concerned.
We will connect you to our department dealing with tea, and your tea board is essential part of the, I think is chairman of the committee.
Okay, sir.
I would like to thank both our distinguished speakers for the highly interactive and an interesting session.